everybody, I'm Luna. Welcome back to Luna ơi! As you know, the Covid-19 virus, which we used to call coronavirus, is still spreading in many countries around the world, but not in Vietnam. If you watched my last video about this subject, you should be happy to know that our government is the very first country in the world to completely control the COVID-19 and repatriate our citizens with 0 deaths. Just like we were the first country to contain the SARS outbreak back in 2003. However, the situation is still very bad in China and it's getting much worse in many other countries such as Korea, Japan, and Iran. And Donald Trump just put Mike Pence in charge of controlling the COVID-19 outbreak in the USA. Anyway, I hope wherever you are, you stay safe. The threat isn't even completely gone here in Vietnam, which we will talk about soon. But I just hope that this whole problem will be solved very soon and that nobody else will suffer because of this disease. In my last video about COVID-19 virus, I talked about the anti-communist Facebook groups who were spreading lies about Vietnam. They said Vietnam's government is incapable of taking care of the health of our nation. And obviously, they've been proven wrong. Today, I will talk about the virus and racism. Most of you must be very familiar with the racism of Westerners toward Easterners. Even the word Westerner is Eurocentric. And I've talked about Orientalism of people in Europe and USA against Asian people in the past. But I'm not talking about that kind of racism today. In this video, I will talk about racism among Asians. Recently, there has been a lot of conflict between Vietnam and South Korea because of the COVID-19 virus. According to a report from February 28th, there are currently over 2,000 COVID-19 cases and 13 deaths in South Korea. Most of the cases have been in Daegu City, which is ironically a city known for its medical tourism industry. Many people now call Daegu the Wuhan of Korea. I haven't been there, but EJ has been to Daegu many times, and he says it's a very beautiful city with a lot of friendly people. So it is very sad to hear for both of us. Here in Vietnam, we had a total of 16 cases and all have been cured, no deaths, and at the time of this recording, no new cases for over 2 weeks. So, by comparison, the situation in Daegu is pretty bad. I really hope that they can contain it soon. Unfortunately, South Korea has had many problems with managing the disease. Even members of the South Korean government, such as the conservative UFP majority leader, the UFP spokesperson, and a UFP National Assembly member have been quarantined for holding meetings face-to-face, despite warnings not to gather unless strictly necessary, which led to the shutdown of the entire National Assembly building and canceling for legislation sessions during this important time. In fact, in the city of Daegu, more than 450 followers of Korean Doomsday have contracted COVID-19, including the official who was in charge of the district's fight against the virus, who was identified as a member. Wait, what? Doomsday cult? Really? It's true. There is a cult in South Korea that refusing to wear masks and stop meeting in public. They aren't being careful about the virus at all, and it's really adding to the problem in South Korea. If you want to know more about this, you can check out the blog and Twitter account of the blogger Ask a Korean, who updates about the situation in South Korea all the time. But that's not really the point of my video. So let's get to the main story. About 5 days ago, on the 24th of February, there was a group of 20 South Korean tourists who came to Da Nang, Vietnam, the city I'm living in, and they came directly from Daegu City. Our city government was very concerned and decided to follow exactly our procedure to contain the virus. So when the airplane landed, a team of doctors and nurses immediately came to the airport to explain the situation, check their health, and hope to bring all of the passengers to a quarantine place for 14 days. Over 50 of the Vietnamese passengers were sent to a military base 20 South Koreans and 2 tourists from Thailand were brought to our lung hospital, which had better equipment. When they got to the hospital, 20 South Korean tourists suddenly refused to stay there. Some of them wanted to go back to Korea, some of them wanted to stay in a hotel, and by hotel, they meant a 4 or 5-star hotel, not a cheap one. Well, to respect their wishes, our city government managed to find them a hotel which met their demands. The government even offered to let them stay there for free. Yes, for free. When we were about to bring them there, they suddenly didn't want to stay in that hotel anymore. They heard that there was a passenger from the same plane who got a fever. So then, they wanted to stay in the hospital so our doctors can take care of them if something went wrong. And also, they would have to pay for their meals at the hospital. So, okay, fine, we canceled the hotel. A few hours later, they changed their minds again and wanted to go back to the hotel. But well, unfortunately, that hotel refused to take them this time. Our city government tried so hard to find another 4-star hotel for them to stay in. And this time, the government offered to pay for both their rooms and their food. That means they are offering a free stay in a 4-star hotel and free 4-star food for 14 days. But that hotel needed time to prepare an isolated area, so they had to wait in the hospital for a few more hours. That was when the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of South Korea sent a letter to our government saying that they strongly disagreed with how we were treating their citizens without asking for their opinion first. Well, we are sorry that we didn't come up with a better totally free luxury quarantine plan. That's our fault, I guess. Actually, according to the doctor who was in charge of treating those tourists and our deputy director of Disease Control Center, we shouldn't have let them enter the country first. We care a lot about the relationship between South Korea and Vietnam, and we know that there are a lot of Korean tourists coming to Vietnam every year, especially to Da Nang City, and a lot of Korean imperialists Korean companies spending money on manufacturing in Vietnam. That's why we tried our best to treat them well and meet their demands. But we still need to protect our own citizens too. Even though you said that you don't have any symptoms, but you came from an infected city, we still need to put you in quarantine because we need to make sure that you are in totally good health before we'll let you walk freely in our country where this dangerous virus has been contained. Well, if the story ended there, it would just be like a normal story that happens every day, everywhere. But nope. Those South Korean tourists made it become a big deal. The story spreads all over South Korea. Thousands, maybe millions of Korean people talk about it and criticize Vietnam for what we did. On the 25th of February, less than 24 hours after the South Korean tourists landed in Vietnam, there was a South Korean TV channel, YTN, which made a report about how badly the South Korean citizens got treated in Vietnam. They said that the tourists were treated like beggars, the food was bad, and the living conditions were horrible, and so on. It makes me sad to say this, but it is a fact that racism of many South Korean people against we, the Vietnamese, is pretty bad. We are poorer, which means we are inferior. They are richer, which means they are superior. I think many South Koreans forget that in the 20 years after the Civil War, they were also very poor. They had to work very hard to become the rich nation they are today, and we are also working hard, and our country is growing richer now. Yes, Vietnam is poor, and we are just trying to do our best to protect our population. We treat everyone the same when it comes to disease outbreak. There are no exceptions. All the passengers from that airplane had to go to the quarantine area, not only just the South Korean tourists. We even brought over 50 Vietnamese passengers to a military base for quarantine, which had less fancy medical equipment. The soldiers living in the military bases had to camp outside so people can have their beds. 2 Thailand tourists immediately followed the instruction of our doctors without complaining. It was just the South Korean passengers who complained. When we served them food, they complained that the food was horrible. But you know what? The bread they ate for breakfast was one of our most famous foods, bánh mì. We, the Vietnamese, are proud of it, and we usually just eat a 90 cents bánh mì, but the bánh mì we served these tourists was $1.5. The horrible meals they complained were from the most famous Korean restaurant in our city, and it was worth $9 each. While the Vietnamese in the quarantine area could only eat $2.5 meals. The restaurant which prepared the food was pissed after knowing what they said about their food, so they decided to release the pictures of their food. It was way better than the meals that South Korean hospitals were serving their patients in South Korea. See, we even treated them way better than their own government. The dirty, disgusting toilets in the hospital that they showed in their pictures and videos were the only thing that we got. Everybody had to use the same toilets, even our doctors. They were old and they didn't look fancy, but at least they were clean. Sorry that we are poor. Sorry that we can't offer something better, but it was all that we had. The YTN channel interviewed some people who were involved in this scandal. One of the guys complained that they were locked in a room with 2 or 3 other tired-looking people and they could only eat every few hours. Are you serious? You are in a quarantine area. Of course we have to lock you in a room. And because there were too many tourists, we didn't have enough rooms, so 3 to 4 people had to share a room. Remember the Vietnamese living on a military base? They had to live with over 10 people in one room, and they were happy about it. And one more thing, you said that you can only eat every few hours. May I ask you how many meals you want to have a day? I know this is the bad situation and it's uncomfortable, but sometimes things like this happen in life. And even though we are a poor country, we try to show good hospitality and keep all of our guests as comfortable as we could. It really makes me sad that our people are being judged like this. When the story against Vietnam went viral, instead of telling South Korean people to calm down and try to understand the situation, the South Korean government even accused us of treating their citizens unethically. And until now, they still do nothing to stop the negative stories from spreading. Our city government even sent an official apology letter to the South Korean people trying to explain and calm them down, but of course they didn't even care about it. Oh, and one more thing I need to mention. About 2 months ago, when the virus had just erupted in Vietnam, it was pretty safe in Korea back then. The South Korean government immediately advised their citizens to not go to Vietnam. Well, it was normal because they just wanted to protect their own people, right? But there were so many people who used this chance to say many racist things about Vietnam. They called us barbarians and said that we would never be able to contain the virus. Well, 2 months later, this barbarian country contained the virus for over 2 weeks, and South Korea is now the second worst country in the world at containing Covid-19, only after China. Going back to the main story, because we could not meet all of their demands, we decided to send 18 of them back to South Korea at 12 a.m. on February 25th. 2 of the tourists agreed to stay in the quarantine area, so we let them stay. Most of us, the Vietnamese people, at first we tried to let this go, even though we were very angry about this. But when the incident became a big deal in South Korea, there were a lot of South Korean people saying horrible things about us. We decided to do something to fight that false narrative. 3 days ago, we started a hashtag campaign, Apologize to Vietnam. It became the top trending on Twitter and even on Naver, the most famous search website in South Korea. The purpose of this campaign is not just to make South Korean people apologize, it's also a way for us to tell the world what actually happened, to tell you the truth. We cannot just let racist people say whatever they want. We need to stop the racism between not only Westerners and Easterners, but also between Asian countries. Racism has been existing in our society for a long time, and capitalism does make it much worse. Racism of South Koreans against Vietnamese has been getting worse and worse since they started bringing their companies to Vietnam. Here are some personal stories. One of my roommates worked for a South Korean company for 3 years, and when she quit the job, she promised to herself that she would never work for South Korean companies anymore. She could not even remember how many times she had to cry out loud in the office in 3 years. EJ, my partner, has worked with a lot of South Korean customers when he did the business consulting a few years ago, and he heard a lot of terrible racist things they said about us. He says it was common for South Koreans to shout at Vietnamese waiters and other lower level staff like they are dogs. And I believe it after talking to many of my friends who were treated similarly as South Korean companies. Do you know about imperialism? Imperialism is when rich countries come to developing countries to make a big profit. South Korea has been trying to imperialize Vietnam for decades now. We produce technology and fashion and many other products for South Korean companies, and they make millions and millions of dollars off of Vietnamese labor. And our Vietnamese workers are paid much less than workers in South Korea would be paid. Fortunately, it's not as bad here in Vietnam as many other countries because our government has many programs to reduce the damage of imperialism from nations like South Korea and Japan, but it still affects us. And just because most of us are poor and we work in South Korean factories, that doesn't mean South Koreans are our lords and we are their peasants. We demand dignity and respect in the workplace, just like workers from any other nation deserve. But there's always a silver lining in every dark cloud. There are some other South Korean people who understood the story and apologized to Vietnamese people. It really warmed my heart because at least there were some people who listened to our side of the story and sympathized to us. And EJ also knows many South Korean workers who are very respectful and caring towards Vietnamese workers. And I've also met many good South Korean people here who have treated me kindly and with respect. So there are many very good South Koreans who are not racist, and I hope that they will hear us and understand why we are upset and help improve our reputation in their home country. I hope that there will be more and more people who understand and try to get rid of racism. I know that not all of South Koreans are racist. There are still so many nice people out there. We don't want to fight and we don't seek hatred. We just want friendship and harmony. Well, there's a lot more to say about this stuff, and we'll be following up soon, but that's what I wanted to say for now. So, thank you for listening. If you find my videos are interesting, please subscribe and maybe consider being my patron. See you next week. Bye bye.